You are listening to the Jboy Show, your number one source for the SEC.
My goal was to run through his soul and grab his heart when I run through his soul.
Kurt, Nate, Coach Staff, those are memories.
I think we've established ourselves as, I think, the premier conference in college football.
Now, the SEC is better at the top. It's better in the middle.
The Southeastern Conference remains the premier conference.
Now takes the snap. Looking for the receiver. He's got Lutz and Kirkland. Touchdown, Auburn!
When you think about it, it's always been the SEC and everybody else trying to catch it.
I think this is probably the best league from a competitive venue standpoint.
They have the most capable teams. You just look at those programs, the way they recruit, how they invest.
Snap to Burrow. 3 steps. Fires. Back corner of the end zone. Over the shoulder catch. Did he hold on? He did. Justin Jefferson. Touchdown. Tiger.
And now, your host, Jboy.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us on another edition of the Jboy Show, your fastest growing SEC sports podcast in the country. Whether you're watching us on our new YouTube channel, listening us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, whatever. Like I said, I don't care if you're listening through a cup with a string on it. We just appreciate you joining us. Before I get to one of our just adding it to the list, the guy that we've had on the audio version only, I'm excited to get him on the video version. We're going to get to that in a second, but I got to give a shout out to our partners at betonline.ag. The online casino is always open. We know we got March Madness coming up. So if you're a guy that likes to pick singles, teasers, pleasers, parlays, whatever you like, make sure you head over to betonline.ag, where the fun's always happening. They got great sign-up bonuses. They're going to take care of you. They play sharps. They're going to put numbers out early. They're not going to wait and play the game. They're going to give you a chance to win and compete. So head on over to betonline.ag. But without further ado, I got to bring on one of my favorite guests when it comes to basketball knowledge, a guy that was a standout player at Tennessee, a guy that could do a little bit of everything. You see him now on the SEC network broadcasting, basketball analyst, does an unbelievable job. And that's Mr. Dane Bradshaw. Dane, what's up, man?
Not much. Great to be on with you. Thanks again for the invite. I must have done okay. I passed the first test.
Hey, man,
I'm honored to be back on.
Hey, you made the team with flying colors. We're excited to have you. We're not going to trade you for a washing machine like Monix or anything like that, so don't worry about that. But I do got to start out. And you played at Tennessee. Obviously, you know, with what you do and you know, who you loved and who you played for. I've been surprised a little bit, Dane, and I know they've had success. But there's been ups and downs. And to me, I look at the older guys. I always do that. You know, I look at Fulkerson. I look at guys like Pons. I think their inconsistencies and having to depend on true freshmen in any sport at this level is tough, regardless of how talented they are. Everybody's not Zion Williamson. Can you just tell me what you think about Tennessee and how they can turn it around? And really, what's ailing them, Dane?
What's benefiting them right now, I'd say, is their non-conference play, because I think that's what's keeping some Tennessee fans like myself optimistic, is the fact that, yes, where they are currently is not worthy of a 5 seed in the NCAA tournament with the way they're playing. However, their full body of work is. So that non-conference that they've
huge, and
the Kansas win is starting to look better again, where that looked in the SEC Big 12 challenge as okay, yeah, but that's not the same Kansas. Kansas starting to play a little bit better. Yeah. So that non-conference is really helping them to where, to me, it's like, gosh, if they can just get to the end of the finish line of the regular season, hang on to a 5 seed, that gives you that chance to be like, you know what, get a fresh start. This team is capable of winning a couple games in a row, even if they hadn't showed that consistency in the SEC play. And I still think they can be a Sweet 16 team, which sounds crazy when you look at how they're playing currently with the ups and downs. And it's just a matter to me of getting all the guys clicking at the same time, which is so much easier said than done. And I think we talked about it some on the first broadcast, but I look at Tennessee's offense as potentially having 3 huge weapons. One is just their motion offense when they're sharing the basketball and they're assisting on, 60% of their makes. Yeah. That's what people have loved about watching Rick Barnes' offense. But when teams take that away and force them to play one-on-one, we've seen that the 2 freshmen, Keon Johnson, Jade Springer, they can break you down and go one-on-one and get their own. And then they love to play out of the post.
Yeah.
Eve Pons and John Fulkerson are very capable guys down low in the block, and you can isolate them. And Rick Barnes likes to play inside out through the elbows and down on the block. So in a perfect world, as a Tennessee fan, coach, player, you have all three of those weapons, and the defense is a damned if you do, damned if you don't. But the issue has been, in most games, only one or two of those weapons are working, and sometimes none of those are. Yeah. But having watched them a bunch, like it's there. That's the frustrating part is you know what can be there. And I agree with you. You look at the older guys, because the freshmen, I've said this all season long, the freshmen have the highest ceiling on the perimeter to break you down, make that one-on-one clutch basket when nothing else is going right. And I get that. But that has to be part of your offensive, arsenal, not the weapon. And with the absent play down low, it's putting too much pressure on that side of the ball. And, I think it's a confidence thing. As a senior, it's very easy to put too much pressure on yourself. And when you're John Fulkerson or Eve Pons, the standard has also been raised at Tennessee. Like when you see what Admiral Schofield and Grant Williams, all of a sudden you're like, all right, this is my turn now. I got to be, one of the most memorable players in Tennessee history, and a Player of the Year candidate, and a potential NBA player draft pick. So I'm not saying it's Kentucky necessarily, but it's Kentucky-like in terms of that pressure you can start to put on yourself individually. That wasn't really there before. It was okay, yeah, just go out and bang, have a good senior season. But now that I got to think that's factored into just some of the pressure that these upperclassmen are putting on themselves.
Dane, I think that's exactly right. I think you can look at a couple teams in the SEC. You look at Auburn, where the standard's been raised, and that's why I think, and I'll continue to say this, and I want to ask you about this as we get down the road here in this interview, about the SEC really taking more of the national stage in college basketball, and I've got a theory on that. But Dana, where do you use this capable? And I couldn't agree more, because I remember last year, watching John Fulkerson just be a nightmare for teams to have to guard, was able to hit that little hook with both hands. Obviously, plays as hard as anybody. And again, it's a lot different being a supporting actor and playing the leading role. And there is more pressure. And I think you're exactly right. And you're a guy that knows, you've been through it. You understand that. And I do want to segue that into, I'm looking around the conference, and I want to start with Auburn here. Again, no postseason play, but there are no excuses. I know they're young, but to me, being young only lasts for a certain amount of games. And I look defensively, the lack of communication. Look, I know they didn't have Sharif Cooper last night. You look down that roster, there's not a whole lot of point guards on that roster, especially ones really in the country that can do what Sharif does. But when you look at Auburn, I think the thing that people look at, and Bruce Pearl to me is one of the best coaches in general in the country, and they'll be fine next year, especially with what they have coming in. But there really hasn't been a progression for some of these freshmen that showed flashes. I mean, you look at JT Thor, and Dane, you know as well as I do, you can't that kid shot when he's hitting the step back mid-range, or if he's hot from three. He almost single-handedly brought him back against Kentucky. But then you'll have games where guys disappear. And I know youth, and I understand that, but we're 25 games in, man. Like, you know what's going on, you know where you're supposed to be, and you just really haven't seen a true progression, in my opinion, from most of those guys.
Well, it's been a difficult season on them. And again, you would like to think you're self-motivated. And I thought they'd done, really up until the past couple of weeks, I thought Coach Pearl and that team had really done an admirable job of being ready to play every single game. I agree. And they were out there, even when they were on some losing streaks for a while, they were competitive in those games. They were playing hard. They were the aggressor. And they were playing with an urgency. Like, you couldn't turn on the TV and say, and tell which team had a postseason ban and which didn't, because they were playing as hard. I do think that's changed. And I think with Sharif Cooper out, it adds insult to injury with Justin Powell out, obviously without 2-point guards last night. And it's not to make excuses, but you've got a team in Florida that has something that they're really playing for, and they've gotten better, and they've had everything you can think of to rally around this season. The Keontae Johnson setback, horrible situation, you hate it, but it's also made them grow closer as a team, and they're playing better, and they've got the NCAA tournament seeding they're playing for. Whereas Auburn, all right, look, only a few games left in the season. Cooper's out, so is Powell. Let's just go out there and hoop is kind of what you saw. Now, they played better in the second half, but, you should. And so I was actually scheduled to have the Auburn-Mississippi State game last week. I remember talking to Coach Pearl, and he said, look, and I asked him similar questions about just, the motivation factor. He goes, I've been really proud that we've really only had one letdown game all year. I believe it was the Georgia game where it was after the Baylor loss, where he just said, guys just weren't ready to play. But he goes, so if you look at the schedule, there's only one game I'm disappointed in our effort. Now, since that phone call, Mississippi State gets postponed, so that one's out. And then they don't show up to LSU. They don't show up against Florida. And so a lot's changed in the past two games in terms of where you got to look at with the psyche of that team. Now, do I count them out totally? In terms of their remaining schedule, Tennessee, Alabama, no, because I think what helps is just some of that rivalry component of, all right, I'm going to get up to play this one. And you'd like to think they're going to get up to play every game. They're young kids. They're, are they starting to be checked out a little bit? It's human nature. And Bruce Pearl, who's such a great motivator, even he's sitting there saying, what else can I do to get these guys ready to play?
No, I think you're exactly right, Dan. The way I look at it, and number one, I do want to say Auburn could, if Jabari Smith Jr. coming in, if Sharif Cooper comes back, Auburn, Justin Powell coming back, Auburn could have one of the best rosters in the country next year and really have a chance to make a run. So I don't want it to sound like I'm saying the program's going downhill, but it has to be Bruce Pearl's greatest challenge to try and motivate. Because again, I can sit here and say no excuses. You can sit here and say no excuses and all that stuff. Great. Is great. But if I'm a kid in your psyche and I'm turned on ESPN and I'm hearing, oh, well, this team's on the bubble and this team's on the bubble and this team's going to be in, and you're starting to see all the ads for March Madness and everybody's starting to get excited, it does affect you. And I wonder, Dane, if that's something where they look at next year, because they've lost a lot of games very close as well. You look at next year, and for some of these guys that are coming in or some of these older guys saying, listen, all the stuff Coach Pearl's preaching about, we have to do this and we have to do this. If we don't, we will lose. We lost with Sharif Cooper, so we can get beat. And again, I think it speaks to the SEC by anybody on any given day. And I think it may actually turn what is a negative into a positive, because Bruce Pearl, in my opinion, is one of the greatest ever at getting guys up to play. You played for the guy. You know as much as anybody.
Sometimes you have to learn. You have to learn through losing a little bit.
Yes.
And I mean, Alabama this year right now, as good as their season they're having, I don't think they have as good of a season right now. I don't think they're as good defensively or consistent without being exposed and humbled last year. I think Nate Oates would tell you that. They shot it well, but they couldn't stop anybody, no matter how much they preached to them, dedicate yourself to defense. And so there was the buy-in in the off season with the emphasis from the coach. And so, but the last thing on Auburn, I will say too, is I'm sure these kids have good practices. I think they go into games encouraged and motivated to play. However, when you're accustomed to losing, as they've had happen to them this year, and with no postseason goal, it just makes it that much harder to get up off the mat when you take that first one or two hits. And when losing doesn't hurt as much as it usually does, that's when you get a little bit of a problem. And you can't tell me right now, if you're on the Auburn roster, that when guys lose, it's the same feeling as a more competitive team losing, where you're really disappointed and you're pissed off and all those things. I've been there before. I've been on losing teams where, as much as you want to sit there and kick your locker and show you're mad, you kind of get used to the losing a little bit, and that's a danger zone.
I agree. And to kind of go back even earlier, you talk about Alabama losing last year. I think the best thing that happened to Alabama this year was getting beat by Western Kentucky at home and watching those guys make fun of their fans walking out of Coleman Coliseum. Because you know as well as I do, and I'll say this all the time, there is not a more motivating factor for an 18 to 22-year-old male than getting embarrassed in front of all your friends and all your family and on national television. That just does something to you. And again, that's not the only factor in playing hard, but it adds to it. And I think it really propelled them. And Dane, I think you knocked that point out of the park. And I do, speaking about kicks and kicking lockers, make sure you check out our friends over at ebay.com/sneakers. Authenticity guarantee, whatever you want, Jordans, Air Force Ones, any shoe out there. We all know the great section eBay has. Go to ebay.com/sneakers. They'll guarantee you the tag's right, the logo's right, the tongue's right, the laces are right. The threads on the shoe, every one of them is right. And you're getting exactly what you wanted in a timely manner. So head over to ebay.com/sneakers and tell them Jboy sent you. But I do want to segue to Alabama, Dane, because I'm looking at the tournament and I want to ask before we dive into the Tide. Number one, how many teams do you think get in right now from the SEC? And when I look at the league, I do not, and Alabama's had a great year. I look at who they've beaten. They've beaten some very competitive SEC teams. You look at kind of that non-conference, lost to Oklahoma, and people say, oh, well, this player was out. Oklahoma was missing their best player as well. And the SEC goes and wins the Big 12 Challenge. I think that was a good barometer, but I don't see a team in the SEC right now that is Elite Eight or Final Four worthy unless they just get a great draw or Alabama just cannot miss like Auburn did a couple years ago in the NCAA tournament. Am I crazy thinking that, Dane?
Yeah, you are. Come on, man. You gotta be on board with Alabama. What more could they do?
Yeah.
I love them. In the games they've lost, they've been competitive down to the wire. I mean, the Missouri game certainly did not get the whistle that they wanted to at the end. In the was Oklahoma correct in the Big 12 Challenge? Herb Jones way less than even 70% playing. So, I think Alabama can certainly make a run to the Elite Eight Final Four. Outside of that, I don't think so. But Alabama, I think Nate Oates got to the Sweet 16 with Buffalo. Of course, I think he can win one more game than the Buffalo squad did. So with this Alabama team. So, and look, in the SEC, second time around, you get used to the way Alabama plays. And no matter how much film is out there, you just don't know the speed and the commitment to that style of play until you experience it once. And they're going to be going up against teams that they likely have not played before and that have not seen them and have not witnessed just how good you have to close out, and discipline on that help, because they're going to shred you apart with the layups and the threes. And so, but again, my whole thing on Alabama is not about the offense. It's about the defense.
I agree.
And I think one great part about them too, I know they've had two different coaches. However, so many teams now, they get old and have more mature rosters through the transfer portal, right? I mean, if you want to get old and have some upperclassmen, go grab a couple. You know, whether it's Alex Reese, John Petty, Herbert Jones, these guys have been on the same campus in the same program together for a long time.
Yep.
And I think that I think that has a lot of value outside of bringing in some grad transfers here and there and saying, yeah, we got 4 seniors. Well, yeah, but, and so, and I think when you go through that, because I lived it after my second year, Buzz Peterson got fired. Bruce Pearl came around my junior and senior year. I'm telling you, the bond and the urgency between guys that had been through everything together, coaching changes, all that, I just don't think you can replicate by bringing a bunch of guys together that haven't. I think it's an advantage.
No, I agree. And we always say that in the NCAA tournament, teams with older guards tend to typically do well, especially in the age we live in today, where so many kids are leaving after the first year or the second year. But I'm gonna disagree with you, Dane. I do not think, and you know me, we're mainly an SEC show. I hope every team that goes in the SEC tournament from the SEC, I hope they all get in the Final Four and they're all in different sides. I would love that. I am interested to see, because I look around the league this year, and outside of Jeremiah Tillman, and Castleton, I like at Florida. You know, we've talked about Fulkerson and Pons. I don't see a dominant center in this league. And I just wonder if one of these SEC teams, because look, Alabama can get hot from 3 and beat anybody on a given day. But my question is, if the 3's not falling, and we talk about their defense, something I've said as well, I think the difference in their defense last year when shots weren't going in as compared to this year is night and day. I look at a guy like John Petty last year. If his shots weren't falling, you saw it affect him on defense. This year, they're communicating. He's running around. You look at guys, Herb Jones is the best defender, I think, in the country. When I watch him with what he's able to do and his versatility, now he can hit the 3 ball. And I understand that. I'm interested to see.
Yeah, but Nate Oates is going to get he's going to get Bruner back, Alex Reese.
See, that's the key to me. I think Bruner and Shackelford are the key.
And now all of a sudden you're going to have, whether it's a Luka Garza or Hunter Dickinson at Michigan, all these big guys that are out there. That's how the game's evolved. They turn that into an advantage, disadvantage of, okay, you're bigger than us on one end. We're going to front the post or do what we got to do on defense, and we might get beat some. But we're going to spread you out. You're going to have to come guard us from here, and we're going to kill you that way. So in years past, the big man had even more important role. Look, we played against Greg Oden back in the day. We were starting to spread things out back then, but Greg Oden, that was kind of the marquee big man. Joakim Noah, Al Horford, those were guys that I played against. But it's not that same presence anymore. And I guess I don't want to say importance because I value big men. I do, but the game has changed so much that, you got to win with some size and toughness. I get it. But in terms of, hey, we got to have somebody we can throw it down into the post too, so we can take a contested 5-foot jump hook. I don't think that you got to have that.
Yeah. And really, I'm saying it more for rebounding and offensive rebounding and teams trying to slow down Alabama a little bit as much as possible, which is tough. We say that like it's easy, but they get the ball half the time. And I think just like in anything, like in football, Dane, we talk about having balance is so important. And again, I just think it's going to be really interesting. It always comes down to matchups to me. In that tournament, I think you'll agree with me, unless the team is just head and shoulders above, which, Baylor kind of, playing not very well last night. I know they hadn't played in a while. They got to get back to form. But you do bring up some great points, man. Like I said, I don't want to bring people on here just going to agree with everything I say. That's boring. And again, Dane, you've forgotten more basketball than I do, but that'll be one point we'll be interested in watching. I'm going to have to get you back on now, and I'll be the first guy. Look, Alabama runs to the Final Four or Tennessee. I'll be the first guy bringing you back on here, giving you the we're not worthy sign, everything like that. But I do, as we're winding down here, I want to bring up a couple teams, and you brought up Florida. And I think Mike White is a guy that doesn't get enough credit. I think, trying to compare somebody to Billy Donovan and the run that they had at Florida, you brought up Joakim Noah and Al Horford, which were absolute monsters. Al Horford was a monster, and you got to see it live in person. But I look at a team like Florida that goes on the road, Dane, and beats West Virginia and then comes back and loses to South Carolina at home. But last night, to me, for the first time outside of that West Virginia game, and I know Auburn didn't play great defensively, but Florida really has an identity, man. They're able to slow you down when they want to slow you down. They're athletic as hell in transition. And if the threes are falling for Florida, Castleton, to me, just keeps on improving. He's really starting to understand his spacing. I even saw him try and pull a few mid-ranges last night. I think when they got up, he tried to get in his bag a little bit down there and put some stuff on tape. But when you look at Florida, are they a team that you think, even without Keontae Johnson, could get into the tournament and surprise some people? Because I think they're going to be slept on, Dane. I think they've been slept on the whole year. And Mike White, he can get you ready to play. And he called a timeout after Auburn hit their first three last night and really flipped the switch.
Yeah, I think it's really important for them to finish the regular season strong. I would like to see them get one of those double buys in the SEC tournament, to where even if they lost that opening game, it probably wouldn't be a horrible loss. Because to me, they got to hang around that 6-7 seed. When they get that 8-9, it's like, all right, you might win an opening round game, but your chances of getting to advance any further are so much more slim. So at that point, you'd rather be a 10-11 seed, I think. So look, I'm a big fan of Mike White, and as much great history he inherited at Florida, he did not inherit a great roster.
That's a great point.
I mean, Billy Donovan, if I'm not mistaken, that last year they were 17-14. Some guys left for the draft, NIT team. He didn't take over Joakim Noah and those guys coming back, or a bunch of great recruits necessarily. So and he's had an Elite Eight. Now look, last year, I'm sure he would admit, was disappointing for everybody. Yep. Expectations were so high, yet they were so young. But I think the expectations were somewhat fair, because you saw those pieces in the McDonald's All-Americans. They had KJ Johnson, Virginia Tech transfer. And when you get and the grad transfer thing, to me, has gotten so much hype, because it's almost like the only recruiting part left, and it gets so much attention. So whoever lands the top grad transfer, it's like, oh my God, he's the savior. Kentucky, Sarr hasn't performed much this year. Keontae Johnson last year didn't do that much. The big kid, Travis Reed Travis, went to Kentucky a few years ago from Stanford, where everybody said, oh my God, it's over now. Like these grad transfers, one thing, the SEC's maybe a little bit better than people realize when they come from the Pac-12 or ACC. Yeah. And number two, they're getting more hype than is justified, just because all the attention is around the grad transfer market, because there's nothing else to pay attention to. I'm digressing, but there was so much hype around them, and they could never play as fast as they wanted to, because to accommodate Andrew Nembhard and KJ Johnson, they had to play a slower pace, even though the rest of the team needed to speed up. And it just wasn't a good fit. And they didn't have a great year. But now, look, they've changed some things. They've adjusted personnel-wise. They've gotten better. And I think the key word you used was identity. I think Florida now has an identity. They're bought in. I look at a guy like Scotty Lewis, who's McDonald's All-American, who's just on his own pace. I mean, he's now coming off the bench, hadn't had a great season, but he goes in there and works hard. And when I watch him, I haven't been in the locker room, but when I watch him give effort on the court as a McDonald's All-American, knowing that he and his crew probably thought one and done type because of all the hype, to just, be in that role and thriving in it and accepting it, I think is huge. He kind of reminds me a little bit of the John Petty story, different players, but you know what? Not everybody's going to be one and done, two and done, but by year 4, you're a player of the year type candidate and still on draft board. So who cares if it took you 4 years?
Without a doubt. I mean, I think Scotty Lewis, talk about athletic. I think he could jump up and slap the Jumbotron if he wanted to in the middle of the court. But I do, before I let you go, I could not bring up Arkansas and Ole Miss. You look at the way Arkansas is playing. I think they are scary. Eric Musselman. There is a few coaches I do not want to see in the NCAA tournament. We talked about Nate Oates. Eric Musselman is one to me. I think he is an unbelievable tournament coach. I think he is as passionate. I watch the way the kids react to him. He's able to get after him when he needs to get after him, love him up when he's supposed to love him. Shoot, I feel like he's playing defense out there. Sometimes it looks like they're playing with 6. And then you look at Ole Miss. I mean, Schuler, why he's the engine that makes that team go. Kermit Davis. We know he's an unbelievable coach. They didn't start off very well. I've got some friends that are Ole Miss fans that were disappointed in the start, but now you look at them and they're as hot as anybody. Just give me your thoughts real quick, Dane, on Arkansas first, please, and then Ole Miss. And if you think these two teams, especially if Ole Miss gets in, which I think they're a couple wins away, I think they actually were the first 4 out the other day. And after that win last night in Missouri, I would have to think they're going to get in at large. But just your thoughts on those two teams.
Yeah, Arkansas is legit. And this is a team that it took them a while to come along, but they're as hot as anybody. Justin Smith is their glue guy. He's the transfer from Indiana. Man, he does everything for them. They're a different team with him on the court. But they got so many other guys. They play extremely hard. But in a year where every single program across the country is saying, well, we weren't able to have the offseason we wanted. We haven't been able to develop the chemistry. And all these things that not excuses and justifiable reasons. Yet Eric Musselman is the exception. He's gotten a ton of transfers, a ton of freshmen, and got these guys to bond during the season and be connected more than any team with this many amount of newcomers. Does talent help? Absolutely. Look, Moses Moody is a one and done type kid. He's been great for them at guard. He's got some good transfers in, but the way they're playing for, I don't know what it is, probably 80% of that roster playing together for the first time under these conditions, I think is remarkable. And he's somebody that he makes his team get up in front of their teammates and literally rank each other. Who's the hardest worker on the team?
That's awesome.
Who's like uncomfortable conversations that make them accountable. And I'd be curious to hear him some on how he was able to, that's typically done throughout the summer, but how he was able to expedite and accelerate that process given this type of COVID year. And then Ole Miss, I mean, Kermit Davis is a brilliant coach. He's a guy that if he's got his roster, I'm probably going to take Kermit Davis. And then if you switch rosters, I'm probably taking Kermit Davis. He just, I can win with mine and I can win with yours, whatever you want. However, Vanderbilt, Kentucky left on their schedule. Winnable games, yes. I with them being on the next 4 out, according to Lenardi, I think they split their last 2 games. And what would be, it would hurt them to lose to Vanderbilt, but I just don't see them going 2-0 down the stretch there. Vanderbilt can put up some points, and if they win that, I think Kentucky finds a way to beat them. So I just don't know that they end up getting on the right side of the bubble without getting to at least the championship in the SEC tournament. As much as I'm rooting for them, I just don't.
Well, that's why I said the SEC tournament is so important. These people talking about, oh, well, the conference tournaments, they really don't know. For a team like Ole Miss, I mean, that's life or death. Like that's your shot, like you're saying, or at least giving yourself a chance to cement yourself. Obviously, the Vandy win doesn't help you a ton, to be honest with you. The Kentucky win doesn't even help you a ton.
Well, and that's the same scenario in the SEC tournament. For a team like Ole Miss, you want to get as good of a seed in the SEC tournament because it's not about trying to stockpile wins against bad teams.
Yes.
You don't even want those bad loss opportunities. You want a good seed in the SEC tournament to where it's clearly hey, we win this one and this one we're in. Not, oh boy, if you lose that one, you're out and lose that one. I mean, it's got to be the quality of opponents. And you want to avoid, the bad loss opportunities that the SEC tournament can bring if you're in those opening round games.
Yeah, it's you hit the nail on the head. Dane, always love having you on, man. You do an unbelievable job. I know our audience, loves the way you're able to take complex things in basketball and put them in layman's terms. And really, we say win the water cooler here. We want them to be the most knowledgeable. And you're a guy I love to have on. Do an unbelievable job on the SEC Network. Everybody check him out. Regardless if it's your team, you're going to learn something, whether it's him, Jimmy Dykes, Mike Morgan, those guys up there do an incredible job. And Dane, I really thank you for coming on. We got to do this again sometime. And I thank you guys at home for watching, listening, however you're doing it. Make sure you go to the jboyshow.com. Got merchandise on the way. I know I keep saying it. I promise the orders are in. It's getting here. I know you guys are blowing me up about the hoodies and the hats, and we love it. We're going to get it your way, just like we do here at the Jboy Show. It's been another edition of the Jboy Show with the great Dane Bradshaw. You saw what I did there. Check us out next time. The Jboy's going, gone. The Jboy Show is produced by David Cohn, technical director Dave Hammock, creative director David Culbertson, audio engineer Faison, production assistant Kyle Orr, and our executive producers Jake Crane, Vince Thompson, and of course we film at Melt Sports in Atlanta, GA. So come check us out.